whether I should be insulted that my questions were so predictable. She predicted her cross.
You don't want me to comment on that. Just thinking the same thing. Okay.
So just be careful not to look all that way because I won't make it.
Okay, good morning. Ms. DiDino, how are you? Did you take a look at June Exhibit 14? Did you review this letter? This is the 12/21/23 letter when it came in?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have a role in, I guess, looking at the letter and deciding whether or not to respond?
Deciding whether or not to respond, no.
Okay. What role, if any, did you have in responding to this letter? None?
I've read the letter.
Why is it that you went through and checked the union affiliation and department status of each of the signatories?
I didn't check. I looked at the names and I know these staff members from being here for 20 years. And so I didn't go in and check union affiliation. I looked at them. I know many to be 580, and the name that stood out was July Torres because I had always known her to be 94. So I identified her as possibly a 94. I wasn't sure how 580 sent this letter out for signature, which is why I also highlighted there were people on here who work for BHDDH. So that's why I was like, well, maybe the list got mixed up with something. I wasn't sure.
And then you testified that, correct me if I'm wrong, that you told Ms. Delgado that July Torres may be a Council 94 member. Or
Yes.
she was at one point.
Yes.
And do you know if Ms. Delgado then checked to make sure whether or not she was a Council 94 member?
I don't know.
And do you know, did you have any discussion with Ms. Delgado about why she added each of these names to the email? Why she copied each of these people on the email?
We had a conversation in that we wanted to acknowledge to staff that we had heard their voice, and so that's part of why they were copied in an email to say, like, we hear you, we're responding to you.
And did you know she was going to copy Mr. Collum?
I knew that Mr. Collum was going to be included. I think Mr. Collum needed to know about this letter because I didn't want to be accused of colluding with 580 by knowing that 94 is trying to put forward this pilot, and then we get sent this letter that says, wait, you can't put this pilot forward, we need to talk about this first. So I did think that 94 needed to know.
So, okay, so that's what, you thought 94 needed to know, not because July Torres was on there, but because you wanted them to know that 580 members had some issues with the schedule change.
Both.
Okay. And when you, do you know Rich Collum?
Yes.
Did you think it was a good idea to copy him on this type of letter?
I didn't have an opinion as to it. We're all professionals and we all hold different hats, and so I wasn't sure. I did not know that he was going to respond, if that's what you're alluding to.
Yeah. I guess my question was, were you surprised when he did respond the way he did?
Yes.
And were you involved at all in a conversation with Mr. Collum that Ms. Delgado testified, where she testified that she went to him and she admonished him and said you shouldn't have done that? Were you part of that conversation?
No.
Could you take a look at Joint Exhibit 14? Do my questions again. All right, so if you look under on the bottom of page 1, reduced weekend visitation support. These 580 members that work in the FSU unit wrote, weekends are our highest demand for staffing visits due to children in school and parent work commitments during the week. So when you read this, did you disagree with that statement?
I didn't think that statement fully explained our duty for visitation.
But these are people that, at least by your testimony, at least 76 of them worked in the FSU unit and did this on a daily basis, and they're saying weekends are our highest demand. Did you discount that, or did you look into that?
I looked into it.
What did you do to look into it?
I regularly look at overtime that is done for visitation or when visits are scheduled. The fact is that at CST, when they make their schedule, they only do 2 to 3 visits a day. So if they were working on the weekend, they would only be doing 2 or 3 visits. So the demand during the week and the demand on the weekend, they're doing 2 to 3 visits every day that they work.
Well, the next line says, before the short notice of these plan changes, we voiced significant concerns to you and your leadership team about the need for more support staff to cover parent-child visitation on weekends. Do you recall them voicing, by the way, were you part of the leadership team?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall 580 support, 580 social caseworkers and casework supervisors expressing concern about needing increased visitation on weekends?
No, they talked about needing increased support for any visitation. It was not specific to the weekends.
Okay, so the 76 people that signed this letter, that you're saying that that's not accurate, they did not?
It was not as to the weekends, and ultimately, we gave them 4 more CSTs. We converted 4 positions, and we gave them 4 more CSTs because we recognized their need for more CSTs to do visitation anytime during the week.
So, I'm just trying to understand this. There's a visit, there's a family, the Smiths, on Saturday. Saturday's the only day they can meet with their child because they work during the week. There's a CST that's been scheduled for that visit on Saturday for weeks, months maybe. That CST now decides that they no longer want to work on the weekend. That CST then, say, moves to a Monday. Now, if that family still needs to continue the Saturday visits, the CST that now moved to Monday would either have to work overtime to do that visit, or there'd have to be a different CST. Is that accurate?
That CST would either have to do overtime or there would have to be a different staff member.
And one of the things this letter says, and this is under impact on children and families, Joint Exhibit 14, child support technicians are assigned and matched with the needs of children and parents, and with whom those parents and children have developed relationships and trust. So isn't the goal, the ideal, that the same CST that gets to know the family continues to do those visits for that family? Isn't that the goal?
The goal would be anyone who does the visitation with the family would remain doing the visitation with the family. CSTs aren't matched to particular families. If a CST has an opening in their schedule that fits the CST being able to do the visit for the family, then that CST gets assigned that visitation.
Well, we heard testimony, I think, from some of our witnesses, and I think even from one of George's witnesses, that there are some CSTs that match better with families than others. For example, you might have a family who has maybe addiction issues, and there might be a CST that's more familiar with that, or a family that maybe has some domestic abuse, and you want to make sure you have a female CST. So there is matching involved in them. You do want to make sure the right CST is doing the right monitoring.
That's
Isn't that
not
right?
the majority of visits, no.
But it does happen.
It does happen on those specialized cases, yes.
And the goal, would you agree that the goal is to have continuity with the same CST in the visits, not just to like sub them in here and there.
The goal would be continuity for any staff doing a visit, not just CSTs.
Alright, and then if you take a look at this letter, there are concerns on the impact on children and family.
Which letter are you referring to?
I'm sorry, doing exhibit 14. But it also talks about the lack of notice provided to the 580 members, 12 working days notice during a chaotic holiday season, and that they weren't notified or allowed to give feedback prior to this change. Would you agree that somebody doesn't have to work in the FSU unit to have an opinion on whether or not there should have been notice given to their fellow members on a schedule change?
I agree with regard to the notice, but I don't read those signatures as saying we're agreeing with them that they should have given you notice, or we're agreeing that you haven't, we're supporting them in that their view is you didn't give notice. I'm reading these members as signing, saying we are impacted.
Well, the request from the members on the last paragraph is, we request that you postpone the implementation of reducing staff schedule for weekend parent visits. Before implementing, we ask that you engage with social caseworkers, casework supervisors, and our union leadership. As in any case, the input from the front lines is vital and valuable before significant decisions that affect us like this pilot. So, isn't it true that you could certainly read this letter that fellow members wanted their fellow workers to be able to have a voice in the change of their schedule? Not necessarily that they're particularly impacted, but that they felt that it was a bad idea to implement something without talking to the people affected first.
I'm gonna object to the question.
Speech?
Yeah,
Would you like that?
well, that, you know, I frankly, I got lost on where the actual question was.
No, the question is very clear. It's really, really, really long.
It was a long question, but it was understandable. I'm gonna allow Rick to answer that.
You can answer.
Okay,
If you got it.
Don't have to repeat it.
so what I understand of your question is that basically the staff who signed this wanted leadership to engage with the frontline staff who are impacted by this before implementing it.
I think Ms. Weems wants to know whether or not you could see the people who weren't working in FSU as signing to support their fellow bargaining unit members and the goals of their leadership. Correct, Ms. Weems?
You're so good at this.
Now that you phrase it that way.
We should just let him do
then
both of our
yes.
questions.
Yes, I could see that.
And
being
going
the
to
reason.
Respondents Exhibit 1, this chart, there were you have signatures of local 580 members at DCYF, but outside FSU, there were 42. So would it surprise you to know that 96.1% of the signatures here previously worked in FSU?
No, it doesn't surprise me because I know who these staff members are.
So, alright, thank you. You gave some testimony about Michael Pina, and I believe it was Petitioner's Exhibit 6, thanks. Now, Mr. Pino would not be, Pino?
Pino. It's Pino.
Mr. Pino would not be the person that puts these openings out for overtime. That's someone else that does that, right?
No, what happens is that, if Mr. Pino had a CST in his unit, he would offer this overtime to that CST. If that CST said no, then Mr. Pino, we have a form that says, you know, this is the case name, these are the kids' names, this is the transport needed, this is where the visit happens, basically explaining the overtime. That sheet gets sent to the various clerical, so there's one clerical who calls for all CSTs. Then there's the regional clerical who calls for the region and then puts it out to all regions. So there's different clerical. On here, Cassandra is the clerical in Mr. Pino's region, so yes, when he gets the response back from the clerical who called the CSTs and nobody took it, it's his responsibility to then let Cassandra know, no CSTs took this, I need you to send this out to caseworkers in the region.
And she got back to him on June 14th at 1:19 p.m. and said no takers for OT. And then Kenneth McPherson got back to them at 5 p.m., and it's his job, as I understand, to send out the overtime for the auxiliary list. He says no takers for the auxiliary list. So it was at June 14th at 4:49 p.m. that Mr. Pino got notice that there were no takers from the aux list. Is that accurate?
Correct, but it was only at 10:33 a.m. that he sent it to his clerical to send out for the overtime.
Oh, we don't have that in this.
That's at the bottom, it's on the bottom of page 2, where it shows Mr. Pino sending an email to Cassandra Brooks at 10:33 a.m. and then it says, the subject is OT, and it says thanks.
Okay, but we don't know if that was a follow-up email, if he originally sent it, 5 days ago. We just have in here that it says thanks.
Correct. I didn't say that that's where he initially sent it out, that's all that's been provided here, so that's the only time frame I have of him speaking to his clerical about putting out this overtime.
Right, and you said you were concerned that it came too late, but you don't know that it came late. He could have sent it and it wasn't part of this exhibit.
It could have.
One of the things that Ms. Delgado testified is that this pilot program ensured more, I think she used the word more contact. Do you remember her, for parents?
She refers to family visitation, where I've been using the term family visitation, she refers to it as family contact.
Because contact can mean something else, right? Like as far as how many times.
We have changed in our department operating procedures, rather than talking about it as visitation, we're talking about it as like opportunities for contact between parents and their children.
1 second, let me. Alright, I'm all good, thank you.
Thank you. You do it?
No questions.
I do have a couple. First, I'm pretty sure this is in the record, but just to be clear, casework supervisors, are they non-union or in 580?
They're in 580.
Ms. Weems asked you about forwarding the letter of concern, which I believe is joint 14, to Council 94 President Cullen.
Yes.
And you talked about why you felt that was appropriate.
Yes.
Was that your personal opinion?
Yes.
So you had a different reasoning than Ms. Delgado did?
Yes.
And do you recall testimony about a meeting between DCYF management and Local 580 about the pilot program on December 11th?
Yes.
Were you part of that meeting?
Honestly, I don't recall.
Okay. Then I have nothing further.
Ms. Weeds?
Nothing?
Mr. DiDino, just a couple of questions. You said that you have reviewed Joint Exhibit 5 and Joint Exhibit 14, those are the letters from 580 that list their concerns.
Yes.
To use that term. As a former social caseworker, and casework supervisor, did the list, and specifically the list of concerns in Joint Exhibit 14, which is shorter, that list seem unreasonable to you when you read the document?
The list didn't seem unreasonable, however, the list did not seem that it was just relative to this pilot. For instance, burnout. It's an anomaly for someone to last 20 years in child welfare. We're all anomalies right here. The average burnout for a worker in child welfare is between 2 and 5 years. And so they listed burnout as a possibility. They listed staff retention as a possibility. All of those things are the nature of the work that we do in child welfare. I don't equate them to being an outcome of the pilot.
Did you see either of those terms as potentially being accelerated as a result of this pilot program from the union's perspective?
I can see why the union would put that in there, yes.
Did you, and now it's just you personally, ever discuss with the union prior to the time that the pilot went into place the impact of those concerns stated in Joint Exhibit 14 of the pilot?
I don't think that I approached the union to talk to them about it specifically, no.
Do you know whether or not anyone at DCYF, the director or Ms. Delgado, had that conversation with the union?
I'm not sure.
Pilot's still ongoing, as I understand it.
Correct.
So at the end of the 90 days, well, let me back up. My understanding of the testimony that's come before, and I think you also testified to the same, is that DCYF has not received any complaints, for lack of a better word, from 580 regarding the pilot program, problems that might have occurred. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say complaints. I would say that we haven't received information that this has impacted workers being able to do their jobs and visitation moving forward.
Does that include an increase or decrease in overtime?
I don't know.
Does that include an increase in overtime specifically for social caseworkers or casework supervisors doing work that may be CST work?
I haven't been made aware of that, no.
Was there any meeting scheduled or discussion held after the 90 days expired with 580 to review what had happened as a result of that 90 days in that pilot program?
Specifically after the 90 days, I don't recall having a separate meeting. I've had a couple separate conversations with Bethany relative to information that they received and the confusing way that it was received in like that grid where we looked at the regional administrators needed to say how many visits occur on a Saturday, how many on a Sunday, and there was such a variety between the regions that it didn't make sense. So I've had further conversations about that.
But you're not aware of any formal meeting scheduled or held between DCYF and Local 580 at the conclusion of the 90 days of the pilot program to discuss the impact of the pilot program?
I think that it was on our agendas, but a formal meeting to only talk about this, I don't recall, no.
Thank you.
I have one follow-up if I may. What about during the pilot program? Are you aware of any efforts by DCYF to arrange meetings with 580 about what was happening as it was going on?
We have consistently asked for impact. We have consistently asked, like, tell us if visits are getting canceled, tell us if your workers are saying, I can't do this, we have consistently asked, as part of our regular agenda in meeting with 580, but there's no separate meeting specifically only to talk about this.
Do Do you recall how often those meetings were happening during the pilot program? Once a month, once a week?
So I know at one point we had them scheduled every other week, and then they were scheduled monthly, and sometimes they got canceled, and so a regular meeting, I don't know that I can say we've established a regular actually attending meeting.
But did they ever provide you with concrete examples of a problem during the pilot program? And by that I
No.
mean 580.
No.
And one final thing, you said you met with Bethany, that would be Vice President Gregory?
Yes, sorry.
Nothing further.
Just one follow-up if I may, maybe two. You said 580 never identified any specific issues with the pilot program, right?
Correct.
The pilot program began on January 1st, and that was after the union filed its first unfair labor practice, right?
Correct.
So during the time that you're saying they didn't come to you, there were 3 unfair labor practice charges pending, including a request for information that the union had not received.
Yes.
I'm all set.
Thank you.
Uh-oh, no, he looks,
What is
he-
that
he's got a
face?
face.
Ms. Weeds,
Yes.
is it the union's position that when an unfair labor practice is pending, that the union doesn't have any responsibility to provide information to the employer that the union believes might impact the bargaining issue?
I think if the employer has not provided the union with what it needs, and the employer has refused to bargain, to say, well, the union never came to me and identified any issues, I think that's, not a good argument.
I understand you think that, but that's not my question. The question is whether or not your position is that the union doesn't have a responsibility to come to the employer with concerns, problems, complaints, issues that it has, that erupted as a result of their not being bargained.
As part of the union coming to them, I would say if they're refusing to bargain, then I don't think that they have an obligation to say, we don't like this, this, and this, if the employer's refusing to come to the table. Like, what's the point?
Because if you don't provide the problem to the employer doesn't have the ability to change its position.
But they were refusing to bargain anyway, so what would it have mattered?
That's the argument.
Yeah.
Well, that's the circle,
That's,
right? We don't.
I understand the circle,
Okay.
I just wanna make sure the board is clear on what the union's position is. I understand the arguments.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, during the break that, Ms. Weems took, I had a chance to confer with Ms. Delgado about the documents, so if I could have maybe 10 minutes with council, figure out how we wanna handle this.
Yeah, we'll take a 10-minute recess.